One of the common bits of feedback that we were getting from users was that they would like to customize the which external auth service was used for a particular route. So up until now, we've had basically a global settings object, and the global settings object contained a ref to your xauth server. Usually this was just the one that we provide and deploy as part of installing Enterprise Gloo, but you could also provide your own custom one. Let me just install. So it's pretty challenging just from a configuration management and an Envoy perspective to support this at the, on an individual route level. It's also, we kind of went back and forth with several different users about whether that was necessary and we ended up finding a compromise, which is, it was pretty easy for us to expose it as a gateway option, which means just like before in our WebAssembly example, we'll patch our gateway object. So that kind of controls all the configuration for a particular port, a particular listener. By default, Gloo comes with two gateways, one for the standard HTTP port, one for the standard HTTPS SSL port. And then of course you can add your own gateway objects and you can kind of decide which virtual services, so which routes go along with which gateways. So Gloo already had that capability. Now that we can customize which external auth server is used per gateway, we can start to segment traffic to different external auth servers depending on which listener port that the traffic is coming in from, which is a pretty big win for a number of our customers that just needed, essentially two different auth servers for different business units. So let me kind of make that more concrete and actually go through that example. We should have Gloo Enterprise installed here now. Yep, looks like everything's installed and running. So just like before, I'm going to install our demo application. This will take a few seconds. Basically, Gloo's didn't have any route configuration when it first was installed. So it's detecting this, it's generating a proxy object, and then it's converting that proxy object to Envoy config. But that all happens really fast. We can see the route is already active. Our header that we added from before is no longer there again. That's what we expect. So we're in the same starting point as the last example. This time, I want to showcase what it would look like to route traffic for a particular gateway to a new auth server while not changing our global config. Let me just open up that global settings first, just to show. This is what I was referring to before. This is our Gloo settings CRD, and it kind of provides default global configuration for that installation of Gloo. And as you can see, the default kind of, when you install Enterprise Gloo, you're configuring some external auth server, most likely the one that we ship as part of Gloo Enterprise. What we did is we moved this, or we kind of exposed this config as well on the gateway level, which overrides your global setting. So we're going to leave it as using our kind of Gloo native xauth server as the global default. But for our HTTP port that's serving this particular route, we're going to switch it over to a custom auth implementation. So let's actually go deploy that. So I'm actually following an example that we have in our docs. We've written this really simple HTTP auth server, and all it's doing is it's checking the path of the incoming request, and depending on the path, either returning a 200 or a 401. It's also modifying the response to indicate that this auth server was hit with a header. So really naive implementation. Obviously, it's not really performing an auth check, but this just shows that, like, the API is pretty general. You can really do a lot of different things with this as an entry point. So first I'll deploy the custom auth server. And then, just as I was mentioning, we're going to patch our gateway object, but this time we're going to patch it so that we provide, so that for this listener, for this port 8080, we're providing this new server ref. I'm also providing this config next to it that says that it's an HTTP implementation. Otherwise, it would be assumed to be kind of a native Envoy gRPC server. And then we'd get 403s. Cool, so I need to patch my gateway object. And now we need to also change our route. So our change to the gateway CRD told Envoy that, or told Gloo really, for any route associated with this listener, use when there is external auth turned on in the filter chain, use our new kind of custom auth server. But we also need to turn on auth for the route. So we're also going to change our virtual service to say use external auth. And in this case, we're supplying it just the fact that it's a custom auth server. So it's not one of our native integration, native implementations. And this is just kind of an opaque config block. So I need to go apply that, and then we should immediately see the new config is taking hold. Great, so basically as soon as I apply that and I curl, now I get a 401 unauthorized. And that's what we expect. If we look at what this server is doing, it's sending a 401 to indicate that. We also see that it's responding with a header that indicates that it's performing that Python auth. So this is exactly as we'd expect. According to our server implementation, if I provide it with this path, we should get a 200. I think this was written for our pet store demo, but it should work just as well with the service that I have deployed. So let's try that. So now I'm going to, curl, but to the specific path. And as we can see, we're getting a 200 again. We made it through that auth check, and now we're back to the behavior that we had before. The last thing I'll note, and as a side note, there's a pretty nice integration with Kubernetes directly inside of VS Code if you use that. I just wanted to kind of show, to prove the work a little bit. So our proxy object, which is what I'm looking at now, is this object that we've assembled from all of the configuration that users contributed. So our virtual services and our gateway CRDs that we were editing kind of get assembled into this proxy. And this is a representation of that Gloo holds that exactly gets translated into the Envoy config. So the thing that I wanted to show is just that on our kind of listener, for our SSL port, we don't have an auth server defined here. So it would fall back to the default, which is our built-in native XDOS server. But for this particular listener, we're using the one that we specified. So that's where the patch kind of fits in. And that kind of shows if we wanted to support more routes that hit different auth servers, all we need to do is basically create a new CRD on that port and then bind those routes to it and customize which auth server is being used. Great, so that's it for the second demo, which just to kind of summarize, we now enable multiple auth servers for a single Gloo deployment by where as long as you can specify them at the listener level, you can kind of customize them with a different one on each port.